Hi class, we are going to learn how to make a starter because a lot of you said that you do not have access to yeast, and that is perfectly okay because yeast is everywhere. So all you need for this is, we're gonna have at least a cup of water in case our flour needs more, a cup of flour, bowl, spoon, and something that you're gonna store it in. So here we go, cup of flour. Water, we're gonna start with half a cup. So I have a cup and we're gonna eyeball it. That's about half a cup. Stir it, and it's gotta make like a slurry. So as you're mixing around, if it's too thick, then you're just gonna add a little more water to it. So right here, we're already too thick. So in goes more water. And who knows, we may end up using the whole thing. If it's a nice day, you might want to just leave it open and uncovered for a bit, but there should be yeast in the flour. Mix that around, add a little more water. So there we go, 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water. And that is because in Colorado, you know, it's a very dry climate. There's not a lot of water in the flour. You just got to get this mixed around. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can be lumpy. That's it. That's all you need. Now, let this sit for 24 hours. And then the next one we're going to talk about is how to feed your starter. It is day 2, time to feed your starter. I've got my wonderful little assistant Lucy here. You gonna help out? It's also college sweatshirt day and hat day, so I made sure to put $1 in the bag. All right, here we go. Your starter. You're gonna be able to see what yours looks like. You're gonna take the lid off, and in one day, it should have a little bit of liquid on top. If you see little bubbles in there, that's awesome. That's a good idea. That means it's working. So, to feed your starter, half of it gets thrown away, and then we're gonna replace it with half a cup of water and half a cup of flour. You need to do this every day if you're gonna keep your starter out on the counter. If you're gonna put your starter in a refrigerator, you only need to feed it once a week. So, if you have a scale, I would weigh out how much starter you have here, cut it in half, take half of it, throw it away. We are gonna actually save our half of our starter today and try to make a pizza dough out of it so it doesn't go to waste. If you don't have a scale, what I would do is stir your starter and then use a measuring cup to see how much of a starter you got. So scrape all those little bits in there. Now, what we're trying to do is build healthy bacteria in our starter and yeast. And so if it doesn't smell funky, you're doing well. I will put a link to a thing for things for you to read about on starters to see if yours is doing well. What you want to look for is to make sure there's no little orange on it and that it doesn't smell moldy or funky. That's a bad thing. So I've got basically 10 ounces. So 5 of these ounces are gonna go for my pizza dough. And then, we're almost there. And it doesn't have to be exact, ladies and gentlemen. This is 1,000 years old technology. Back into the bowl. And now to feed it, you're gonna use half a cup of, I'm using bread flour this time, but any flour you have is fine. It doesn't really matter. You can even use rye flour. And they say rye flour is really good because it just has more nutrients in it. There's more nutrients in rye flour than there is in bread or all-purpose flour. So there's our half cup of flour, half a cup of water. Give it a stir. And then again, if you're gonna leave this out on the counter, just let it sit. But if you wanna only feed your starter once a week, she's done. If you only want to feed it once a week, you put it in the fridge. Now, the goal is to be able to make sourdough bread with this in 2 more days. So we got 2 more feedings to go. Tomorrow, you're going to do the exact same thing. Half of it in the trash. Feed it with a half cup water and a half cup flour. Put your lid back on it. And again, we're going to leave it on the counter. We'll see you tomorrow. See ya. Hey class, welcome back. It is day 3 of making your starter. So here's our starter. Now, if you could zoom in on the starter, you will see that there is liquid pooling in it. And that is because we couldn't get our video production crew here for the last 5 days. So we had to put our starter in the refrigerator until we could get somebody to videotape this. So now that everybody's back and we're videotaping again, our starter's come out of the fridge, so it's got this poolish liquid on here. That's fine. What you want to do is you want to smell it. And as long as it smells sour, sour good, moldy bad. So if it smells like cheese, then you got to toss it out and start all over. But ours is still good. You know, what is basically happening there is it's a little bit of alcohol from the yeast that's growing in here. So it preserves it. It's actually a preservative. So we're gonna drain that off. And then we're gonna just throw away half of this. What you'll look for on this is like, yeah, the top part of it starts to turn gray. That's not necessarily bad. That's all the bacteria in there. I always drain the liquid off and then I give it a good stir. You could, now what you're gonna throw away, because remember, we're just trying to build the starter and get this healthy. The older your starter is, the healthier it is and the harder it is to kill. And it's harder for bad bacteria to grow in there the older it is. But again, when you're first starting, you throw half it away. Could I take half of this and make pizza with it? Yes, and if you can go ahead and do that, go ahead. But remember, we're trying to make sourdough, so give it a good stir, and then truthfully, you should save it. We're not going to, because I'm not making pizza today or anything else. So half goes in the trash. Hopefully, you can think of something to make with it. This is the last day of feeding our starter. Tomorrow, when we get back, we are going to start making our sourdough bread. So, how much flour? At this stage, you know, it's like half a cup, and then half a cup of water. Give it a stir, and then we're gonna leave this out on the counter. So tomorrow when we open this up, it should be bubbly, it should be frothy, and we're gonna be ready to make bread. So that's it, this is the last day, day 3. By day 4, we should be ready to go. Now, if your starter's not perfect tomorrow, you will just be a day behind. You'll do your starter one more time, half of it in the trash, feed it again, and then you should be ready by day 5 to make our bread. So again, what you're smelling, it will smell sour. Sour is good if you smell any mold or you see any orange streaks. Orange is a bad mold in there that's not healthy for you. So you want to make sure that it smells sour, that it doesn't smell moldy, that there's no orange in there, and you're good to go. So we'll see you tomorrow when we're actually going to make the bread. Hey class, we are gonna make our sourdough bread today. Finally, your starter should be on day 4. It should be bubbly like this. It should look and have little air bubbles on the top. That means it's ready. It's all set to make bread. So give that a stir. And so we're gonna take out some of that today for our bread. And then we're gonna feed it after we're done. So here is my recipe that I've used for, I don't know, 2 years. We're doing a half batch today, which means 400 grams of flour, 230 grams or milliliters of water, which could be grams if you want to measure it, 10 grams of salt. I'm using kosher salt, actually 5 grams. We're using half the recipe, 5 grams, and 320 grams of our starter. So those of you guys that don't have a scale, I'm gonna be measuring these things so you can understand how to do it without a scale. So start, 400 grams of flour is basically 2 1/3 cup. So I got my scale on, there's 160. And I'm using full-on bread flour. If you don't have bread flour, don't worry about it. You can use just regular flour, should still come out all right. Okay, there's our 2 cups. Here comes our 1/3 of a cup. And boom, we're just a little shy, so we're gonna put in, that was 1/3. Here's half of 1/3. Probably should have used half a cup. 2.5 cups. Go with that. 405 grams, there we are, good enough. Now to that, I'm gonna tear out my scale. Those of you guys that don't have a scale, how much? We're gonna use 160 grams of starter, and I'll tell you how much that is here in a second. It's probably gonna be about half of your starter. And again, like I said, you're gonna feed this after you're done today. So there is my 160 grams, nearly perfect. Those of you guys at home, that is 150 milliliters, or if you want to go the cup route, that is 2/3 of a cup. There we go, 2/3 of a cup of starter. So that goes into here. Make sure you get that all in there. And like I said, now you're gonna feed your starter if you want to keep using it. If you're not gonna ever do this again, then yeah, you're just gonna waste it and throw it away. But I'm gonna use my starter again to make like pizza, so we're just gonna put some flour in there, and then I will put a little bit of water in there. Consider it fed. All right. Now we need 5 grams of salt. 5 grams of salt is basically a teaspoon. So here's our teaspoon of salt. And then you need 230 milliliters of water, 230 milliliters. You can weigh that out with your scale to 230 grams. So 230, I am using the KitchenAid today, and that's just because it's Mother's Day and we gotta get going and make this quick. 230. We're almost there, there we go, 230. On to the mixer. Now, for those of you guys that are home, if you're gonna use stand mixer, use your hand first to mix it around. That way it won't send the flour all over the place. Get it going into a nice ball. And then you're gonna mix this using the KitchenAid mixer for about 5 to 8 minutes. So we'll see you back in 5 or 8 minutes. All right, class, it's been about 5 minutes and our dough is formed into a nice ball. So we're gonna take this off the hook. I'm just gonna store it in the same bowl overnight. So I'm gonna spray it with a little bit of oil and then just take this ball off, let it sit. It's gotta sit overnight because we're making sourdough, so the bread needs to ferment in order to get that sourdough flavor. Cover it with plastic wrap, which is always the best thing. Don't just put a tea towel on top because it tends to get too dry. So wrap it up into the fridge for 24 hours. Then tomorrow we're gonna take this out. We're gonna let it sit out for 4 hours and rise up again. And then we'll punch it down, and then we're gonna form it into a ball again, put it in a banneton, let it rise up again for another hour, and then bake it. That's it. See you tomorrow. Hi class, all right, it's been a day since we made our bread. It's been sitting in the fridge, which means it's cold as ice. So we need to let this warm up. So we're gonna let it warm up, and what I usually do, if it was a warm day, I just set it on the counter. It's kind of cold today. So what I do is I turn the oven light on, and then I just put this in there with the oven light on. The oven light will produce enough heat to create like a warm atmosphere that'll be around 70, 80 degrees. And we'll come back and check on this over the next 3 to 4 hours. See you in a bit. All right, it's been about 4 hours. So our bread is rising. It's starting to feels a little warm. So we're gonna do the first knead. So we got our bread flour, and this is called a banneton. This is what we use to rise our bread before we cook it. So you want to usually just douse this thing with flour. If you don't have one of these, just use a bowl at home. Put plenty of flour in there. That's just so, because the dough's a little sticky, so we just want it to be able to fall out when we're ready to do this. So, little flour on your workbench. You don't have to knead it like we were kneading it the first time. Just gonna do a couple folds. It's a little sticky, but See those striations? That's all the gluten working there. Alright. So if it's a little tacky, just put some extra flour on it. Put some on your hands, and then we're just gonna work this around. Fold it in on itself a couple times, few times. It's a pretty soft dough, so if it sticks to your fingers, just add a little more flour. But we're just gonna fold this in on itself. Get like a nice smooth side, and then into the Banton. Now, in this, we're gonna put this in here for about an hour to give it one more rise before we bake it. So, there we go. You just sit like that. If you want to cover it, go ahead. Like I said, it's pretty dry in Denver. So when we're about ready to do this though, it should have risen up to the plastic wrap. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna invert it onto a pan, bake it at a high temperature for 35 to 45 minutes. And that's the next step. So we'll see you in an hour. 30 minutes to an hour. We don't know how long this could take. Hey class, welcome back. All right, here we go. Our bread is risen. We are hoping it's gonna come out of this when we flip it over. So it is a little sticky, not gonna lie, this one is. So feels like it's gonna come loose. Hopefully I put enough flour in there. So here we go, ready? 1, 2, 3. And then look at that bad boy. Woo, looking good. Okay, we could score the top of this with a lame, a baker's lame. It's basically just a razor blade. If you don't have one of these, don't worry about it. This is what people used to do in the olden times, so they know that their bread was their bread, that they made it. That's what it's called, a baker's mark. We're just gonna go like that. And now, oven is preheated to 450 degrees. I also have a thing of boiling hot water in the microwave that we're gonna add to this. So we're gonna put the bread in the oven. We're gonna pour on another sheet pan at the very bottom of the oven. We're gonna pour that hot water in there to put steam in the oven to help the bread rise even more. So here we go, into the oven. My boiling hot water. Woo, plenty of steam. Okay, set our timer for 30 to 35 minutes. So we'll set the timer for 30 minutes. We'll check it in 30 minutes. And then if it's still not done yet, we'll go 5 more minutes. So 30, 35 minutes, we'll have bread. Yay, see you in a bit. All right, class, it is time for the bread to come out of the oven. So let's see how we are. It smells fantastic, it's hot. Don't worry about the extra flour that's on the top of your bread if you have that, because as the bread dries, you can just brush that off. But there you go, 1 loaf of sourdough bread from scratch, and it smells fantastic. All right, have fun.